Hello, everyone. If you could please take a seat, we're going to go ahead and get started. As I think many of you know, if you made your way over here this afternoon, there's a lot of traffic today, so we will probably have a few people coming in the next 10-15 minutes, but that's fine. We are also recording this because we have a Zoom link set up for some of Ray's family back in Arkansas. So anyone who misses the early part of the ceremony will have an opportunity to watch it online if they want to do that. I'm Kathleen Winters, and I'm the Executive Director of the Northern District Historical Society. On behalf of the NDHS and the 9th Judicial Circuit Historical Society, a warm welcome to all of you joining us this evening to honor Raymond Marshall as the 6th recipient of the Bill Edlund Award for Professionalism in the Law. And special greetings to Ray's mother and other family who are joining us online from Arkansas. We are really happy that they can be part of tonight's celebration. This event would not be possible without the assistance of numerous court personnel, including Stephen Curl of the IT department, the federal marshals, and the after-hours staff. Thanks also to Alex Murray over here in the corner of the NDHS, and also to Ray's colleagues at Shepherd Mullen for their help organizing tonight's ceremony and reception. It is now my great pleasure to introduce NDH board member and Edlund Award Committee member John Briscoe, who will share reflections on Bill Edlund and the origins of the award. After John, we will hear from 3 of Ray's friends, followed by Ray himself. At the conclusion of Ray's remarks, we hope you will join us for a reception in the hallway outside. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen, and good evening, everyone. I'm glad she reminded me that I'm John Briscoe. I sometimes forget I am a board member and the immediate past president preceding Ragesh Tangri, who's here this evening. The Western United States, by which I generally mean the jurisdiction of the 9th Circuit, and San Francisco, the longtime historical headquarters of the Northern District of California. And remember, the oldest federal court in the West is this court, has been graced throughout its history with some of the greatest lawyers, I dare say the world, but certainly this country has ever produced. Just taking this century alone, there was Garrett W. McInerney, who tried and argued the first case in the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague on behalf of the city of San Francisco and the Roman Catholic Church over the so-called Pius Fund. Shortly after him was John Francis Nyland. These were 2 titans of the courtroom in San Francisco and the entire West at the time. At the same time, you had Peter Dunn. And for those of you who don't know, the firm that we know as Morrison and Forster, which was Morrison, Forster, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark when I started, sometime back in the last millennium, was Morrison, Dunn, and Brobeck. And Peter Dunn was one of the giants in the American bar. I could go on and on about these great historical figures, but they all had one thing in common. They had a magical ability with the written word and a great facility with the spoken word. We cannot find any recordings of Cicero in some of the great trials of his career, but I dare say that great man could not have been more eloquent speaking than those giants. Well, in our era, we've been blessed to have had a number. One of those was Bill Edlund, who headed one of the 2 litigation groups at Pillsbury during that period of time. Alan Littman. Bill was a member of our board, the Northern District's board. He was a member of the Ninth Judicial Circuit Historical Society's board, and was a trustee of the Supreme Court Historical Society. That's just an inkling of his contribution to the larger world of the law and the community that the law served and should serve. He was a mentor to generations of young lawyers at his firm, to young lawyers that he met anywhere, anytime. And I know because he and Iris would have Tuesday night date night at Sam's Grill. I mean, I'm thinking of the Thin Man film with Myrna Loy and William Powell. That was them. A little bit older than William Powell and Myrna Loy, but a dashingly good-looking couple, full of repartee. They would have a cocktail at the bar while my little tiny law firm was having a dinner of the lawyers. Often as not, they would join us. And he dazzled the young lawyers in the firm with his stories. He would ask them, what are you doing? What cases are you working on? Well, sadly, Bill died. He spent most of his career at Pillsbury. And then when he turned 70, at the Pillsbury, at the time he was shown the door, and so he went to John Bartko's firm, where he thrived for the rest of his life until his death in 2016. And so some of us at the Northern District Historical Society, Judge Alsop included, leading the discussion, said, you know, an occasion like this is one that we should mark. These are rare people. We have a number of them in our community. We have had. And so the idea of an Edlund Award arose. And the idea was to honor a lawyer in our midst who exemplified all the traits that we all, and I'm sure we all, cherish them. Accomplishment in the law, facility with and felicity with the written word and with the spoken word, honesty, a commitment to civility in the courtroom toward adversary and friend alike, and a commitment to the community. Back to Bill for just 1 second. Many of us remember all too well July 1, 1993. That was the massacre at 101 California in the offices of Pettit and Martin. 8 were murdered, 6 were grievously wounded. The very next day, Bill and a handful of others, but led by Bill, formed the Lawyers Committee Against Gun Violence. Today, it has merged with the Gabby Giffords organization, so you won't find that organization by that name anymore. But that's just an example of leadership and energy that Bill injected and made sure that everybody around him, whether in his law firm or in some other law firm or in public law practice, knew you have a responsibility to get out there in the community and use your skills, your God-given skills and your hard-gotten skills for the benefit of others. And so one other thing I just have to mention, and that is he would ask for a contribution of time or money, whether it was to the Lawyers Committee Against Gun Violence or one of his many other causes, and you'd get it as a handwritten note that was sent by the United States Post Office. And this was well into the internet age. And if you sent a check, if you responded, or even if you just wrote and said, I can't do anything right now, you got a handwritten letter in response. That's grace. So under Judge Alsop's leadership, we instituted this award, combined it with the Ninth Circuit, And tonight, we're giving it to another extremely worthy recipient. Our recipients to date, our first recipient, I heard she was going to be here, was Louise Rennie, the longtime city attorney of San Francisco. Our second was, where's Doug? I saw him. Jerry Braun. Our third was John Kecker, I believe, then Elizabeth Cabraser, and last year, Jim Brosnahan. These are all familiar names to you. If you don't know these people personally, you have some idea of what sterling lawyers they are and what contributions they have made to society. Today, we're honoring a man who aptly fits all of these characteristics that we set down as criteria for the Edlund Award. And much as I would like to go on about my friend, I'm not even going to name him, I'm going to keep that as a big secret. We have three great speakers here who are going to have that privilege. So, Bob Stumpf.
Good evening. I have good news for you. If you stick around until the end of my remarks, I'll tell you what Ray Marshall has in common with Robert McNamara. But first things first, my name is Bob Stumpf, and my remarks today are entitled Ray Marshall, Character and a Life Well Lived. Note, as you'll see when I talk about Ray, the word character is used in two different but still very positive connotations. When I began practicing law in San Francisco in 1976, and for the next 38 years, I certainly knew of Ray Marshall, his many lawsuits won, his pro bono accomplishments, offices held, but it wasn't until he joined Shepard Mullen, until about 12 years later, that I got to know Ray as a person. Since then, we've worked on many cases together, a lot for Wells Fargo, the California State Retirement System, but we've also gotten to know each other as human beings and now good friends. Now that I'm 77 years old, I find that in evaluating persons I've known, I tend to ask three questions. Do I respect this person? Do I like this person? And has this person contributed to my quality of life? And Ray Marshall satisfies each of those qualities. So let's talk about character and a life well lived. First, let's talk about character. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Character in the long run is the decisive factor in the life of nations and of individuals alike." In Emerson's view, character is higher than intellect. A great soul will be strong to live as well as strong to think. Samuel Johnson observed, "The true measure of a man is how he treats someone who can do him no good." And Mr. Lincoln noted, "Character is like a tree and reputation its shadow. The shadow is what we think, and the tree is the real thing." Honesty, kindness, patience, humility, intelligence, perspective, and common sense. These are all the hallmarks of good character. Ray Marshall has a wonderful reputation. More importantly, Ray is a person of great character. He's honest, he's kind and thoughtful. He treats everyone the same, particularly people who, as Dr. Johnson would say, can do him absolutely no good. Ray usually deliberates before he speaks, and his calmness reflects real maturity. And his many accomplishments are accompanied by genuine humility. Ray is quick to share credit and make you feel good when you see him coming. In sum, Ray has character, and in my view, this is the decisive factor that has earned him this award today. Meanwhile, Ray is also is a character, a real character. His seriousness is accompanied by a real sense of whimsy, and as my partner Carrie will tell you, I give high marks for whimsy. Ray becomes distraught when the 49ers lose a game. He laments that he doesn't run around Lake Merritt enough. And he's not sure that Steph Curry will be enough this year. And the real kicker is this, the moment you've all been waiting for. Ray keeps a rubber snake in his office. Ray's life is also a life well lived. Robert Louis Stevenson said, "The man who is a success, who has laughed well, loved much, and laughed often, is a person who has a life well lived." According to Emerson, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have made some difference, that you have lived and lived well. Maya Angelou noted, "Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, by the moments that take our breath away." Amidst all his accomplishments, Ray has been honorable and balanced and kind. He has laughed often, and Ray unquestionably has made a difference. Not just as an accomplished lawyer, but as a person who is a trusted colleague and good friend. By any measure, Ray's life has been a life well lived. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, what does Ray Marshall have in common with Robert McNamara? Among other things, McNamara was the first person to be president of Ford Motor Company whose last name was not Ford. But a month later, John Kennedy asked him to be his Secretary of Defense. Hang on a second. He then later became the president of the World Bank, and when he was asked, Secretary McNamara, what is the most thing you're proud of in your long and industrious life? And he said, I'm most proud that my children still come home for Thanksgiving. Ray has a similar quality. As you'll see that, well, I can't seem to find the page, so I'll just wing it. His eyes light up when he talks about his son, Kyle. And when he talks about his mother, Mabel, who is watching us from Sherwood, Arkansas, it's just the same. Ray's lies light up he becomes a different person. Family means so much to Ray. Ray has been a person of great character. His has been a life well lived, and I can be very honored to count him as a real friend.
Well, I apologize, my voice is still stentorian, but a little bit foggy. I'm honored to say a few words about my friend, Ray Marshall, a mentor, a macher, and a mensch, especially before this august group, including, of course, his cherished son, Kyle, and his lovely inamorata, Cheryl. I'll leave to others the recounting of his brilliant legal career, amazing devotion to equal justice, and his inclusion in every conceivable best lawyers list. I first met Ray via a polite but, well, pointed letter to me as executive director of the Bar Association of San Francisco, signed by one Ray Marshall. This was shortly after we had released a pretty depressing UC Berkeley study that we had commissioned, revealing the deplorable state of minority advancement, particularly at the top of the San Francisco legal community. So in classic bar fashion, we had, of course, appointed a committee, and the chair of it was Jim Brosnan. We wanted past presidents to chair it. And, but he stood alone at that point because we didn't have any people of color who had been president of the San Francisco Bar. So, writing on behalf of a group of young San Francisco minority Black partners, he basically in the letter said, we think it's great you're doing yet another study of us and you plan to do something about it, but don't you think some of us should be on that committee? So I called Ray up and said, would you like to be co-chair, and could you bring all your friends? So that's basically how we met. It will surprise no one here that not that long thereafter, Ray became the first Black president of BASF in its then 122-year history. Not to say, not too long after that, president of the State Bar. As former Australian Ambassador Jeff Bleish, who followed Ray as president of both these organizations, told me, he said, I always tell young lawyers, whatever you do, don't do it right after Ray Marshall. And let me just say right here that in addition to all of his myriad other virtues, and really by some substantial margin, Ray was the best dressed president in the then history of the Bar Association of San Francisco. My fondest memories of Ray are his amazingly gracious, yet for all of that brilliant and remarkably forceful ability to effect change, especially with respect to often seemingly intractable manifestations of this nation's legacy of racism. As Fred Alvarez, BASF's first Latino president, said, to me, Ray was and is a beacon of what was possible in the San Francisco legal community for someone like me, a serious lawyer in a serious firm doing serious work, a leader of lawyers in the bar that even I, he said, could aspire to, who led with grace, integrity, and inclusivity. Now, I talked to several people of the longtime and talented bar staff at the time, who are always a very tough audience for presidents, who cavilled about Ray, with Joan Firestone, for example, noting his old school charm, especially the quality of graciously treating, as was noted earlier, all people the same, regardless of station in life. My most searing memory of Ray was at the height of the bar's diversity effort. It was a discussion at an executive committee meeting of who our, a matter of great moment, who our new ABA delegate would be, with many names of people of color being discussed. Suddenly, one long-time bar person, a liberal white man, said, I just want to say, you know, I might be interested in that. And I think I'm qualified for it, but, you know, I guess Drew here wouldn't think I was the right color. So there was, of course, a ghastly silence, and all heads swiveled to Ray, who was the only person of color in the room. And Ray, it was just amazing, said, now I know, Harold, you didn't mean for that to come out the way it did. He just rescued this man from a bad situation. And later I asked Ray how many times he has to rescue white people from situations like that, and he just smiled. Ray strenuously pushed for BASF's ambitious minority goals and timetables, and the aggressive action to achieve them, ultimately adopted by over 100 major employers in San Francisco. As an early leader of the BASF-led California Minority Council program, he and a few other young Black partners in big firms, including now UC General Counsel Charlie Robinson, bravely confronted major general counsel, their employers, with the reality that major firms nevertheless had achieved glacially slow minority progress, especially in their top tiers, in no small part due to behind-the-scenes maintenance of the dysfunctional, to me, then and now, origination partner compensation system. Guy, Ray would say straight up to the then general counsel of Wells Fargo, Guy Rounsaville, and co-founder of the CMCP. Guy, when you call the managing partner of a major firm and say, Joe, I want you to make Ray the lead counsel on this matter, the subsequent big money doesn't go to Ray, it goes to the managing partner who was called, or the senior partner who first brought in Wells Fargo many years before. To quote Guy Rounsaville today, Ray's efforts paved the way for providing opportunities to a great many others. And he added parenthetically, to terrific work for Wells Fargo. As incoming BASF president, Ray's stated goals were to be true to myself, not be afraid to speak truths to power, even if my message makes some uncomfortable and others disagree with the need and urgency of time for change. Of special importance today, he said, the experiences of minorities in the legal profession has belied widely held assumptions of a colorblind meritocracy and demonstrates that effective integration has not been and will not be an automatic process. No surprise that true to his diversity commitment, Ray created committees on sexual orientation, gender, and disability, all under the rubric of a broad new equality committee. And he brought us all together, best of all, for a huge gala, the Diversity Ball at the Yerba Buena Center, which was quite extraordinary. He also got down in the weeds, meeting, for example, with the Minority Committee, and bringing in Judge Thelton Henderson to discuss head-on understanding and overcoming pervasive LGBTQ bias in some minority communities. As Thelton told me yesterday, I just so admire Ray Marshall, especially as chief. I had only to call him to get the bars or anybody else's help on pretty much anything. And Ray, excuse me one second. Ray went statewide and nationally and fought the good fight to support and spread the vision of what a voluntary bar could and should do. For example, to expand pro bono legal services, fight for gun control and voting rights, eliminate bias and discrimination in the profession and in society, and as paramount importance to someone like me, to raise the money to accomplish these goals. So I thought I would just close with a wonderful quote from the former California Minority Council Program Executive Director, Lovely Dillon, whom Ray recruited first to McCutcheon and then to the California Minority Council Program. Ray moved easily between his many roles, she said, determined visionary, superb lawyer, relentless rainmaker, fearless advocate for equal justice, consistent mentor, and true friend. At a time when we are looking for heroes to rise, Ray has always been there as a hero for the decades. He has been like the light shining through the famous Bay Area fog, steadfast, lighting the way to safety, and always giving you hope for better shores. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ray Chong, Art Chong. It's out of the way.
Good evening, and hi, Mrs. Marshall. I first met my dear friend Ray Marshall exactly 50 years ago, how time flies, when we were 1Ls at Harvard Law School. I was drawn to Ray because I heard that he was the only one in our class who had a color TV. You see, I was a huge Muhammad Ali fan, as was he, and I desperately wanted to watch Ali Fraser 3, the so-called thriller in Manila, in living color, as we used to say. I made sure we became fast friends. Remarkably, not only has our friendship endured for half a century, but our professional lives have intertwined for that period as well. Following law school, we became colleagues at the same law firm. And when I eventually moved in-house, Ray became my go-to outside counsel for decades. I thought what I would do is recount some anecdotes from our shared professional journey to give you an idea of why I think Ray is so special and particularly worthy of the recognition that he's receiving today. Classmates, Harvard Law School has a somewhat checkered history when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Founded in 1817, it did not begin admitting women until 1950, but even then neglected to build any women's bathrooms. Quite a welcome. It solved that particular problem by installing one in a janitor's closet in the basement. I'm not kidding. It wasn't until 1963 that the law school began keeping data on Black enrollment. For the record, it enrolled 3 Black students that year. By the time Ray and I arrived in Cambridge a dozen years later, the law school was in transition, just beginning to enroll students of color in non-token numbers. That said, the law school, true to form, had not begun to think about, let alone build, a welcoming and inclusive environment where all students could feel a sense of belonging. Ray, who is no wallflower, took it upon himself to build that sense of belonging by inviting everyone in our class to a disco party he called the soiree. It was brilliant, outside-the-box thinking. You see, in the 70s, disco was more than just a music genre. It was a cultural movement that nurtured inclusion and freedom to socialize across racial and other lines. The soiree channeled the ethos of disco perfectly, and it was a huge success, dissolving the social barriers in our class and liberating our classmates to unite in joy on the dance floor. Decades after the soiree, a Harvard Law School alumna would famously say, "Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance." Although she was speaking figuratively, I can't help but wonder whether she had drawn inspiration from handed-down stories of the soiree, when Harvard Law literally came together in dance. Just a footnote on the venue for the soiree, Ray decided to hold the event at the Lincoln's Inn Society, a social club neighboring the law school, with a rich history of distinguished members, including 5 Supreme Court justices and 4 US senators. It was an audacious choice because the club had been de facto racially segregated since its inception in 1907. So you see, in one fell swoop, Ray desegregated that club and did more to foster inclusion in one night than the law school did in the entire 3 years that we were there. That was my introduction to Ray Marshall, the leader. Fast forward to when Ray becomes president of the San Francisco Bar Association. Drew has mentioned that he held something called the Diversity Ball. I think the official name was actually the Soiree 2. Bigger platform, same hopeful vision of belonging and inclusion that has become the hallmark of Ray's special brand of leadership. Colleagues, after graduation, Ray and I both joined the venerable firm of McCutcheon, Doyle, Brown, and Anderson as associates. In the late 70s, law firms were not the behemoths that they are today, employing hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers and generating billions in revenues. Although McCutcheon was the 4th largest firm in San Francisco, it had only 80 lawyers, of whom about 30 were partners. Aspiring to be partner at McCutcheon was not unlike trying to gain entry into an elite social club, like the Bohemian Club or the Pacific Union Club. As a matter of fact, the McCutcheon Partnership and those clubs shared one thing in common back then. They were all white. It shouldn't come as a surprise, I suppose, that one of the named partners at McCutcheon belonged to both the Bohemian and PU clubs. I guess optics and tone at the top didn't matter much in those days. Undaunted, Ray threw himself into the pursuit of partnership with his usual vim and vigor. Before too long, it was plain to see that he was the star of our class. He was getting the best assignments, working for the most prominent partners. However, one day, he discovered that he was not at the top of the pay scale, commensurate with his standing and his exemplary performance. Confused, he went to his mentor and asked why. Perhaps caught off guard by the directness of the question, his mentor said the quiet part out loud. He said, "Ray, you're doing very well, but you also have to understand that you do not meet the profile of a white male from an Ivy League law school." Ray understood all too well what his mentor was saying, but like a true trailblazer, he didn't get mad, he didn't get even, he got ahead. Getting ahead meant becoming the first partner of color in McCutcheon's then 102-year history. Getting ahead meant even after achieving his own success, continuing to do the selfless and hard work of keeping the door open and the ladder down for other diverse lawyers to follow. Getting ahead meant having the courage to speak truth to power, calling out the uncomfortable truth that while we are a proud and noble profession, we can be stronger when we are more representative of the larger society we serve. Attorney-client. I want to shift gears and take a moment to talk about what it was like to have Ray Marshall as my lawyer. When I was the general counsel of an insurance company headquartered in Seattle, I invited Ray up for lunch to discuss a new matter. When we met at the restaurant, Ray looked me up and down, and the first thing he said to me was, "Man, you look like you buy your clothes at the thrift shop." I took it as not so veiled criticism of the Pacific Northwest flannel look that I had adopted as a transplanted Californian. I responded by reminding Ray that I was the client and that he was being inappropriate. To which he said, "Fine, then as your lawyer, I'm telling you, you need a new wardrobe." And that's what I loved about working with Ray Marshall. He's such a straight shooter. You can always count on him to tell it like it is, whether in the courtroom, the boardroom, or in one-on-one conversations. It's just part of his rare gift of persuasion. Over lunch, I told Ray that I wanted him to take over some cases in which my company had insured the Catholic Church against clergy abuse claims. I said that we were prepared to fund a settlement, but he had to convince the church to accept accountability as well. Frankly, I doubted whether he would succeed because the church had dug in with a view to protecting its finances and its reputation. Well, as it turns out, I learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate Ray's ability to persuade. He managed to flip the script on the negotiations and get the church to focus on restorative justice for the victims and not just its own self-interest. He told the church that not only was its dismissive denial of abuse claims untenable, it was compounding trauma for the victims and obstructing their path to healing. It was an incredibly difficult message. But Ray delivered it with conviction and, in a way, his uniquely powerful way that was kind, without judgment. The church agreed to settle. Looking back on it, I can honestly say that I can't think of another lawyer who could have pulled that off. I want to close with a quote from the ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus. He said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." Ray, on behalf of all those you have uplifted in your storied career, thank you for inspiring us with your courage and practical vision. Your steadfast leadership by example has stood as a beacon edging us always a little closer to the best versions of ourselves. It's fitting that you are receiving the Bill Edlund Award for professionalism in the law because you have devoted an entire career to modeling what a lawyer at the top of our profession can and should be. Congratulations. Today you join the rarefied company of Rene, Braun, Kecker, Cabraser, and Brosnahan, each a prior recipient of this award, and like you, a titan of our bar. With that, please join me in a round of applause for the man of the hour, Mike. One more thing. My friend, my brother, my hero, Ray Marshall.
Ray, I would now like to invite you to the podium, and before we hear from you, we have a token of appreciation from the Edlund Award Committee, and we also want to present the plaque, which has been hiding in a closet at the Ninth Circuit for the last 3.5 years, and thanks to Joanna Hartwig at the NJCHS, it has been rediscovered and has the names of all 6 recipients, and thanks to Judge Thompson, is now going to be on display in a case here in the courthouse. So it will be something that all lawyers and others coming to the court will have a chance to see. So please, come up. So one of the things that we do, the Edlund Award Committee, is try to find a token of appreciation, a gift to the recipient that is meaningful to them personally, as opposed to, just another tombstone or something that they can, have on a shelf. In your case, after talking to many of your friends and colleagues, certain themes kept coming up, and one of them was that you're a real foodie. And so we decided that you would receive a gift certificate to Chez Panisse and a bottle of bubbly. So this is something you can hopefully share with Kyle and Cheryl or others and enjoy it in good health.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now the floor is yours.
I'm not sure where to start, because I actually do have prepared remarks, but I'm going to go out of order a little bit, because I was telling John, it's not good to see a black man cry in public, or anytime, frankly. But the words that you 3 stated tonight are meaningful and heartfelt, and I'll say a little bit more, but it's sort of like that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, which was my favorite Christmas movies. With James Stewart. It's a wonderful life. I will just say it's a wonderful life. But before getting to the substance of my remarks this evening, let me say up front that receiving the Bill Edlund Award is a big deal for me. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I know each of the past recipients, and I'm honored to be considered in their company. So to the Northern District and Ninth Circuit Historical Societies, the nominating committee, members of both organizations, our Master of Ceremonies, John, and Kathleen, the organizer of tonight's event, let me say thank you, and thank you. I also, of course, want to give special thanks to Bob, Drew, and Art for speaking this evening. To each of you, your comments were generous, appreciated, and heartfelt, not just by me, but I know especially by my 93-year-old mother who lives in Sherwood, Arkansas, and with my aunt, uncle, and family friends are streaming tonight's event. And my son Kyle, who was able to make it back from New York only this morning, fight traffic, and is here this evening in person. So thank you. As to my remarks, deciding what to talk about tonight was difficult because of the unprecedented times we are living in. Every day brings a new challenge worthy of discussion. This includes a relentless attack on the pillars of our democracy by the executive branch, the abandonment by the legislative branch of its constitutional responsibility to act as an independent, co-equal branch of government and a check on the powers of the president, and the increased politicalization of the Supreme Court with recent decisions that ignore or distort well-established precedent and seem instead to reflect the ideological views of the administration and current court majority. Ultimately, I decided to speak on a topic that has been a North Star guiding both my personal and professional life, much of what you've heard about, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, referred to today simply as DEI, and its past, present, and continued importance to our country. A serious topic. Notwithstanding our current challenges we live in, what I still believe, however, is that we are the greatest nation in the world. I also believe that our strength and envy worldwide stem in large measure from the fact that despite our fraught history, born from the removal and forced subjugation of the Native Americans, centuries of enslavement of Africans, the continued oppression and marginalization of Black, brown, yellow, and other people of color, and the arrival of immigrants from all quarters of the globe, a beautiful and unique society emerged, multiracial and multicultural, yet unified by shared ideals, albeit ideals that as a country we have never fully realized. At their most basic level, the ideals of equality are quite simple. The founding fathers understood this and captured it brilliantly in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, stating, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness." On these ideals, you will find consensus among people of all backgrounds and political persuasions. I believe that everyone who loves this nation wants the same things: safety in their communities, the opportunity to earn a good living for themselves and their families, freedom to associate, express opinions, however unpopular, and worship as they choose. Indeed, as was reconfirmed for me by a father and son trip I took last month to Dubai and Abu Dhabi with Kyle, these are universal longings of the human spirit. DEI, therefore, should be seen for what it is: a framework developed over centuries of struggle to more perfectly achieve the ideals upon which this nation was founded. A framework supported by initiatives designed to ensure that our workplaces and institutions promote fair treatment, respect, dignity, equal access, and participation by all Americans, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, national origin, political views, or other differences. Like the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, this is an easily understood concept, fundamentally aligned with our country's stated values. But make no mistake, the United States has come full circle on this issue. The work to achieve a more just and equal society is now, once again, like no time since Reconstruction, under brutal attack by the president and the administration, which have stated openly and clearly their intention to undo 70 years of hard-fought gains in the advancement of civil rights in this country. They have used fear, intimidation, and here to date, unthought-of powers of the executive branch to politicize, demonize, and distort the concept of DEI. resulting in the dismantling of all federal government DEI initiatives and tremendous pullback by both public and private companies, which have either similarly eliminated or rebranded their formal DEI initiatives. So let me be clear. I unabashedly, unapologetically, and unconditionally support diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me say it again. I unabashedly, unapologetically, and unconditionally support diversity, equity, and inclusion. The initiatives developed under that framework are more necessary than ever to ensure that America fulfills its promise of equal protection under the law, provide the opportunity for everyone to enjoy the American dream, and close the ever-widening gap between the haves and have-nots in this country. With that as its mission, and not the twisted and false narratives of unfair advantage being doled out to unqualified people being preached by opponents of DEI, I believe that a country that values and strives for diversity, equity, and inclusion in education, jobs, housing, access to finance, healthcare, and other essential services is a great thing and the strength of our nation. My life experiences inform my passion on this subject. As a 72-year-old Black man, I've seen a lot, experienced a lot, lived a lot. I've had a blessed life. Bob says, a life well lived. I say a blessed life. My mother would say a blessed life. And happily acknowledge the advancement of civil rights in our country over those many years. At the same time, I also recognize that the Black experience in America remains vastly different than it is for white America. I was raised in a military family. My father, uncles, and cousins all served in the Air Force, and one cousin in the Marines. My father did 28 and a half years, retiring as a senior master sergeant. I was born in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, attended elementary school in Madrid, Spain, and Mountain Home, Idaho, junior high and high school in Rhine, Maine, and Wiesbaden, Germany. Graduated from high school in Great Falls, Montana, college in Caldwell, Idaho, and law school, as Art said, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Since graduating from law school, I have lived in San Francisco, Oakland, and Piedmont, California, where I currently reside, and have practiced in San Francisco for 47 plus years. In that time, I've had the good fortune to meet, work with, learn from, and develop lasting friendship with a widely diverse group of classmates, teammates, coaches, teachers, advisors, associates, partners, colleagues, mentors, and other good people. Through my life journey, whether living in the US or abroad, I have found that regardless of color, ethnicity, nationality, the language we speak, the religion we practice, or political views we hold, people have far more in common than they do differences. We all want to be treated fairly and equally, with respect and dignity, regardless of the circumstances we are born into, and to make the best possible life for our family, our loved ones, and ourselves. DEI is but one useful framework to keep us focused on the country's aspirational goal of equality and the powerful words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. A sentiment expressed by Pope Leo XIV as recently as last week in his teaching document on matters of social and economic justice. Continued retreatment from diversity, equity, and inclusion, however, has placed the country in the precarious position of standing to lose much of what truly has made America great. It is imperative, therefore, that we stand tall and not allow those who fear and demagogue DEI to turn back the hands of time. We have come too far, given too much for too long, to now suffer in silence and go quietly in the night. So, no more woe is me pity parties, no more sitting on the sidelines, no more reactive passive resistance, no more bending the knee, no more thinking things can't get worse. They can and they will, unless we, the people, fight in every way under the law to preserve our democracy and the integrity and long-term viability of our nation's ideals and treasured institutions. So what can we do? Among other things, exercise our constitutional right of freedom of speech and assembly to individually and collectively support the Smithsonian Institution, including specifically the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the National Museum of American History, the National Museum of the American Indian, and the planned National Museum of the American Latino and American Women's History Museum, and fight efforts to whitewash, dilute, and distort the history and contributions of people of color and women to this nation. Support our men and women in uniform, particularly our command structure and service academies, for their DEI initiatives as a proven tool to recruit, build, and maintain the world's most powerful military, and fight efforts to promote outdated, stereotypical views that only white men possess the strength, intellect, leadership, and competency necessary to create an effective and lethal fighting force. Support the Kennedy Center and the Senator Kennedy Center Honors Program, which for decades has been a showcase for multiculturalism in the arts and humanities, recognizing and celebrating the contributions of cultural icons as diverse as Marian Anderson, Fred Astaire, Gladys Knight, Billy Crystal, Garth Brooks, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Smokey Robinson, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, Dizzy Gillespie, Willie Nelson, Aretha Franklin, Judith Jamison, Luciano Pavarotti, and Quincy Jones, and fight efforts to shape the country's consumption of art and culture to the ego, taste, and singular preferences of Donald Trump. Support our judiciary, colleges, universities, law firms, medical facilities, businesses, nonprofits, media, and other institutions and professional organizations in their efforts to adopt and implement DEI initiatives, and fight efforts to bully, threaten, and blackmail these institutions to abandon their commitments to DEI in support of an agenda designed to divide the American people and leave America separate and unequal. I could go on, but I think you understand my point. These are not normal times. If we want diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're going to have to fight for it. I'm not naive. I say fight knowing it will not be easy. But as Dr. King observed, when it comes to the issue of race, we have been here before. As a country, we have endured the pains of slavery, Civil War, Reconstruction, and Jim Crow. In the height of the 1960s civil rights movement, Dr. King counseled us that in a pluralistic, multicultural society like the United States, no group can make it alone. He implored time and again that we must be unified and vigilant in our struggle, and that to ignore discrimination is to be an accomplice to it. So to close, my party note, an overarching call to action is twofold. First, heed the words of Marian Wright Edlund, the noted children's rights activist, who often reminded us that we must not, in trying to think about how we can make a big difference, ignore the small daily differences we can make, which over time add up to big differences that we often cannot foresee. And second, let me again turn to the words of Dr. King, who, speaking to the American Jewish Committee's support for the civil rights movement of the 1960s, explained the moral and ethical imperative underlying diversity, equity, and inclusion, stating, and I quote, "The struggle for equal rights is not ours alone. but is part of the fulfillment of this country's highest and most cherished ideals. By recognizing this, you are honoring the truth that all life is interrelated and all men are interdependent, and recognizing in the true spirit of Judeo-Christian heritage that the agony of the poor diminishes the rich, and that the salvation of the weak enriches the strong, and that we are inevitably our brother's keeper. So thank you for attending, for listening, and doing what you can to make our country a more perfect union and a truly united States of America with liberty, justice, and equality for all. Thank you.